So you can go ahead and start in prayer.
All right. Dear Father, I just thank you for this evening. Thank you for bringing us all together tonight. And I just want to give this time to you now, just as we go through our study in Luke, Father. Just may your Spirit just teach us tonight, Father. Just help us to understand, just be able to learn and grow from what we're going through. And I pray this all now in your name. Amen.
And I've got that going as a backup. Does anybody feel like you're stuck in a rut? Have you ever looked at the popular stories in our culture and noticed how so many of them are built around this basic premise that the main character has a mundane life until someone comes in and takes them on a life-changing adventure? So, for example, Martin is your average teenage slacker until a wild-eyed scientist in a DeLorean comes and takes him on a life-altering trip. Or we've got a young farm boy's life isn't the same after he crosses paths with an old religious hermit who takes him and his droids to rescue a princess. Or we've got greedy Ebenezer, who seems locked in this miserable destiny until an old co-worker returns and shows him a spirited time. These stories appeal to us because we seem to be wired with this sense of being trapped in a boring life. And we're waiting for someone to come in and rescue us and make our lives more than some meaningless existence, right? And I give this to everyone as a preamble to Luke chapter 2 to think about as we look at that moment in history when a life came into the world to rescue mankind from our collective prison cell of meaninglessness. So we'll just talk about the first. We'll cover the first 6 or 7 verses here in the first section here in Luke chapter 2. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. Bethlehem means the house of bread, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was, while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Does anybody here ever listen to J. Vernon McGee?
I've read him.
You familiar with J. Vernon McGee?
Yeah.
He was from East Texas. He was a very popular preacher in Los Angeles. He has now leveled up, but he, one of the first guys on the radio doing. But he has such a colorful way. If you've ever listened to him talk, and I'll never forget when I was listening to him talk about this story, and he had that East Texas drawl, and it just sticks with me when he says, "My friends, you have to think Mary put diapers on God." Okay, so first 7 verses here. I have several notes, but I just wanted to, open up for discussion. First impressions.
I did read that I guess the Quirinius, how do you pronounce it?
Quirinius?
Quirinius. There was some question about whether or not he really actually existed, and since that time, archaeological evidence has proven that, because they were giving Luke kind of a hard time from what I understand in the past. Is that correct? I read that in it's either exposition or in Believers.
It says here, Quirinius was governor of Syria between 6 and 9 AD. So, okay, backing up, it says here that it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. Augustus ruled from 27 BC to 14 AD. And then it says the census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. And it is believed that Jesus was born due to a mathematical error. It was like 3 BC. And the trouble comes when we had evidence that Quirinius was governor of Syria at about 6 to 9 AD. And that would cause critics of the Bible to be all like, hey, there's a contradiction here. This doesn't work out. Well, and then it was later discovered that he was, in fact, governor once more about a decade prior. So his first time as governor would have been at this time. So Joseph got up from Galilee, from Nazareth in Judea, and he headed to Judea to Bethlehem, to Bethlehem. And he went with a woman who was 9 months pregnant, and you have to stop and think this could not have been an easy trip. We tend to think of Mary as riding on a donkey in all of this. We don't know for sure. For the sake of argument, let's say she was on a donkey, but even then it couldn't have been an easy trip, and it makes me think of later on Jesus speaking of latter days when people will have to flee Judea, and he makes the comment, woe to those who are pregnant in those days, who have to travel. So and they were no doubt part of a caravan through all of this, because it would have been dangerous to travel alone with bandits and what have you there. Can you look something up for me here? Look up Isaiah chapter 66. And I'm curious about this because we talk about, Mary giving birth to her firstborn son. And I believe Isaiah 66, I'm looking specifically for verse 7, that it would have indicated that this was actually an easy pregnancy, but I don't have that verse in front of
me. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son.
Yeah, we just finished Isaiah, right? And we finished at 66. And I think that's when it kind of occurred to me. I'm wondering if that is a kind of a messianic passage. And speaking of, so I put that note down when we went through Isaiah 66, and I was wanted to circle back to that when we got to that part. I wonder, that means it was an easy birth. So now let's talk about this in here. Brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling cloths, laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. So I want to, orient your minds, set the stage here. This, by inn, we're not talking a Motel 6. It could have been a back room at someone's home, or maybe like a large sheltered area, and what immediately springs to my mind is like the Rockford Rescue Mission. Like there'll be just this area for people to get out of the elements, kind of thing. Could, you know, obviously in this case it was a place where they kept the animals. When you go to visit the Church of the Nativity today in Israel, it almost comes across like it's a cave. And we got to take our picture in front of the manger, and the manger would be kind of like a trough. It was the animals' feeding trough. So, you know, when you're reading this, you know, step into the scene, but watch your step, because there's no doubt manure and straw everywhere, and we living here in the upper Midwest in a rural community, we know what that could smell like. That he was in this trough that would have been saliva stained. You hear the sounds of the animals calling out and everything. But isn't this the story of his life? He borrowed everything. He is the creator of everything. He owns everything. And all throughout the Gospels, he's borrowing everything, right? He's in a borrowed manger here. He will borrow a boat to preach. He will borrow loaves and fishes. And then ultimately, he's buried in a borrowed tomb, right? Think about this. Right now, he's borrowing Tyler's home. Right? He's borrowing Tyler's living room for his purposes. So there was no room for him at the inn, and that's such a story. There's no room for Jesus in the world system, right? He is, the word holy is to be set apart. He was completely set apart from, you know, what the world has to offer. Did you have any Missler notes on this part, or did you have discussion
I
questions?
did have a discussion question, but one thing I know, like just a note on the swaddling clause that said, infants were often wrapped in strips of cloth to keep their limbs straight and unharmed. This was also the way the shepherds would recognize the infant.
Now, do they like wrap it around the arm, individually? That's what I think of. Not that they're wrapping him with his arms to his body.
Yeah, let's see if. Yeah, this is from David Guzik. These are snugly wrapped strips of cloth. So I would go along with Chuck Missler's notes. And then another. Swaddling cloth comes from the ancient Greek word meaning to tear, meaning they were torn strips of cloth wrapped around Jesus. So.
Okay.
I mean, Larry, would you have any idea?
As far as in modern, maybe more modern times, it was thought that it was a method of comfort for the child to wrap them, because in the CSB they say wrap tightly. I don't know if in your interpretation or in your Bible it says wrap tightly, and it's one thing that has been kind of it's not even cultural in America. You do it too, where wrap them very 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 tightly, and it gives them a feeling of security.
Is it like, you know what it makes me think of? Because we have a dog that gets very nervous, and you hear about the thunderstorm shirts.
Yep.
That cling, that's very tight, that makes them feel secure.
That's the principle. Yeah. So yeah, I found it interesting the way they use the word tightly specifically. So they're wrapped like.
Okay, so the word swaddle actually means tight?
I don't know.
I Googled it, in present day it does. I don't know about ancient times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it just said this one comment said swaddling cloths comes from the ancient Greek word meaning to tear. So they're torn strips of cloth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting though. Yeah.
Almost sounds like similar to like a tourniquet. So yeah, like these were, like it says here from Missler to keep their limbs straight and unharmed.
What would have been going on that would have caused them to be harmed? You don't know the answer to this. I'm just stretching or
It's
thinking.
as simple as they roll over on their arm if it's not in tight and protected. You could get
Okay.
twisted or something.
And then the discussion question I have just about Jesus' birth. So, what does the humble birth of Jesus reveal about God's character and plan?
One thing that comes to mind is that reading, and I might have a note here, so this might be redundant later, but it's okay. Reading about how the King of the universe allowed his son to be born in this way, very humble beginnings. What sticks out to me is this is not something that man could have concocted. This is not how I would have chosen if I was going to make up a Messiah or a Savior. This is not how I would have chosen him to be brought into the world. Maybe that's just me.
'Cause, yeah, he could have easily, been, born into luxury, something like that. Like he's all, God, he's the God of the universe. He could have done anything, but yet God chose this, one of the most, humble,
Yes.
humble places.
Without fanfare, up to this point. I think in adding to what you were talking about in that he borrowed, I heard a great talk just recently on minimalism, and I think his was a life of minimalism. He didn't, he had very little, and in this case he started out with very little, and when he died he had very little. But the people who gave the talk on it said, it's easier to live a Christian life that way, when you have less, quote, stuff, and to weigh down and to deal with, which I found kind of interesting, and I thought about it when I was listening to it. Jesus was a minimalist.
Yeah.
He was very much so. A few things that would take his time other than the gospel and preaching, and
Yeah, he really had that, this is, not my own mindset.
yeah.
Yeah, we're to leave a light touch. I've heard it best said, it's not a sin to have stuff, as long as your stuff doesn't have you.
That's right.
Okay, moving on to verse 8 in this next section. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the Shekinah of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be for all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown.
Yeah. It's hard not to think that, isn't it?
Oh, I love that. So it was, when the angels had gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, "Let us now go to Bethlehem and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us." And they came with haste and found, get that, they had to search. They found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. Now when they had seen him, they had made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all those who heard it marveled at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen as it was told them. I have a ton of notes, so I'm going to yield the floor to anybody who has thoughts on this section.
I think one of the obvious things is the shepherds were very lowly. They couldn't even witness in court. Their word really meant nothing, and yet one of the most wonderful things was presented to them
Yep.
first.
Yep. They were on the socioeconomic ladder, they were one step up from beggars. They were not allowed to enter the temple because they could not. It's a catch-22. Being around the animals made them ceremonially unclean. And in order to go and purify themselves meant they would have to leave their animals. They couldn't do that.
Good point.
And it was more than one teacher speculated that the very sheep they kept were for temple sacrifice because they were so close to Jerusalem. But yeah, and it is too. And you even had a question on this. Can you phrase your question?
Yeah, so what is the significance of the shepherds being the first to hear the news of Jesus' birth?
What is the significance of the shepherds being the first to hear the news of Jesus' birth? And it's because they were of a lower class. And it just keeps following this pattern of the humble beginnings. Jesus, all throughout, choosing the common man. Choosing that which is not highly esteemed, like us. You know, not many wise, not many mighty, not many noble. Hey, that's check. So.
Yeah, it said, that like some of the angels were gone away, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go even unto Bethlehem and see this thing that has come to pass." And Missler, he says, their attitude contrasts sharply with that of the religious leaders who knew where the baby was to be born, but did not take the time or the effort to confirm it for themselves.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in Matthew. It's like they had to consult the scholars and say, "Hey, where is this baby? Bethlehem Ephrathah, for out of you, for though you are the littlest among your brethren, out of you the Savior will come." And they knew, but they couldn't be bothered to go check it out for themselves. They sent the Magi to go check it out.
I know, too, you might have this note that I thought was interesting, that Luke points out, because he's talking to the Gentiles, the angel said, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people.
Yes.
So it points out this is, for everyone.
To you personally, for all men collectively. I bring you, you group, I bring you the good news for all men. And Chuck Smith, man, he paints this picture. We don't know the name of the angel. He speculates that it's the angel Gabriel because it fits in with Gabriel's ministry. So here we have the angel waiting until baby Jesus is asleep before calling his mission concluded, right? And then after this, he was still so excited he had to go tell somebody. But of course, by this time, it's very late at night. Everyone's in bed, everyone's asleep, all the lights are out. Well, he looks over, and out there in the field, he sees a fire going. He sees a light. And he sees these shepherds are the only ones awake. So he goes out and talks to them. And I heard another pastor talking about this. And it's like, he said, "Dads, when your baby is born, how much do you go around talking to everyone you meet, wanting to hand out cigars, wanting to show pictures, So here, the shepherds are being approached by the emissary of one proud papa. So he's like, yeah, he sees these shepherds. They're the only ones left awake. So he wants to tell someone, so he tells them. And then of course, I didn't have a note on this, but a thought occurred to me as we were reading this. It says in verse 13, "And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host." And I knew from Isaiah and others, whenever I see heavenly host, that gets my wheels turning. So what we were like, okay, we know that Jesus is referred to as the captain of the Lord's host, which is a military title of a captain of armies, right? So when and this is just me forming this thought on the fly here. When I see that a multitude of the heavenly host praising God, is this like full dress? Do you picture it?
Yeah.
Angels in full military regalia. And I know that we also speak of the host. We speak of heavenly bodies, stars and planets and that such. I wonder what that looked like.
Well, it said the shepherds, I guess the Greek word that describes their fear, that means they feared a great fear. I guess it stresses the intensity of this fear. Like when the angel first came, it was like they were terrified.
Well, think about it. It's probably, I know you talked about the little fire there, but it's probably pitch black. Maybe stars or something like that, and then suddenly you have this
brilliance.
Have you ever? Yeah.
The Shekinah.
And I'm thinking about your photosensitive your what was called rhodopsin. That's the enzyme that your retina uses to see, and this sudden blast of light. It had to be just overwhelming. It's dark, and then suddenly this Shekinah.
And then the angels are wearing their sunglasses at night.
That's what I'm saying. They lit up that field, man. They lit that field up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just amazing production. Yeah.
I could time travel one moment in time. That's the moment I'd like to go to and see.
Bring your glasses. bring your eclipse glasses, right? So I've heard this in verse 14. I've heard this where it says, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." And I've heard it taught that in the Greek, it actually is literally says peace toward men of goodwill, or men in the will of God. Contrast that with the ruler of the earth at that time, Caesar Augustus. They had the Pax Romana, right? They had 40 years without a war. They had complete peace in Rome, the Pax Romana. And I've also, I didn't write this down, but I've also heard it talked about, where maybe I have it in a later note, but here we have Caesar, who has absolute power and authority, and he just decides to have the entire world registered for a census. And we think, well, man, that could be a very unrealistic request for a lot of his citizens, and yet everyone did it because he commanded it. So he was probably a pretty powerful guy, but he was just a puppet, because the whole point was to get two people to move 70 miles. In the entire known world, this whole thing with the decree to be registered.
So fulfill Micah's prophecy.
To fulfill Micah's prophecy, Micah 5:2. But yeah, he's probably in his mind thinking, I call the shots, I can do whatever I want, and God's up on the throne going, whatever you say, squirt. Oh. Here's my note. It says, if God went out of his way to arrange his birth the opposite of how we would have done it. And it's interesting to here at the end of the passage here, the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God. They had to I think you put it really well there, because I said that they had to seek out Mary, because it said when they have found Mary and Joseph and the babe. I said, so this indicates they had to seek him out, and you put it well too. He had to be marked with the swaddling cloth. That's how you know you'll find him. How long did it take them going from inn to inn looking for these babies until they found the right one? I never considered that, but and maybe were they astonished that, what is he doing in this animal's feeding trough? This is, do you know who he just talked to? Or who just talked to us? Long story short, I have a feeling that Mary and Joseph weren't in that manger for very long. I bet there were lots of people willing to open their doors to him after that, right? So, the only other thing that I had here, this might be lengthy, what time we got?
7:33.
Okay. We had spoken about something Mike Heiser, and it turned out to be in Reversing Herman, which I brought. Reversing Herman. This is going to be lengthy and twisting. I'm going to try to...
but it's worth it.
I'm going to try to summarize it, though, and get from important point to important point as quickly as possible. It talks about the star Jesus, or the Magi followed, which we'll talk about in Matthew 2. But when it comes to the timing of all of this, when it says now, okay, in verse 8, this is the fact that the shepherds were living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night, indicates Jesus was not born in December, right?
I think too they said about the census as well. Like he wouldn't have issued a census during the winter.
When most of Judea, a lot of the world was impassable. It would not have made sense to do it in the spring because of how the spring rains, the early rains, making travel super difficult. So we can reasonably say Jesus was not born December 25th. Setting aside why Jesus is celebrated on December 25th, I think we've all heard. But what I want to do instead is read through this to talk logically about when it could have taken place. And this is, again, by Mike Heiser. And he's referring to Revelation 12, the vision of Revelation 12. Mike Heiser writes, nearly all scholars who have tried to correlate the birth of the Messiah with astronomy share a crucial oversight. They start with the description of the Star of Bethlehem in Matthew 2, which we'll get to. This is a fatal flaw, one that not only overlooks Paul's astral theological use of Psalm 19, and again, I'm skipping a lot. He starts off in Paul writing in Romans chapter 10, where Paul alludes to Psalm 19, which says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day unto day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world." So, Heiser goes to write, Paul had in mind in Romans 10, I believe that the celestial messaging Paul had in mind in Romans 10 can be found in Revelation 12. And I'm going to read that here. Revelation 12, verse 1 through 7. "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth." Okay, sorry, forget what I said about Isaiah 66. "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them down to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God into his throne, and the woman fled into the darkness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is nourished for 1,260 days. Pardon me for a second, because I've not done this before, so I want to see if it's still recording. Huzzah, it's still recording. 38 minutes.
Great.
And huzzah, this is still recording. Okay. Because I don't know. It would be really embarrassing if my camera ran out of memory.
Oh, yeah.
So, I believe that the celestial messaging that Paul had in mind in Romans 10 can be found in Revelation 12. This passage has several items that, if taken at face value, are astronomical signs associated with the birth of the Messiah. Are you reading that too?
No, this is Missler's notes.
Okay. Considering the language of Revelation 12 in this way produces a real-time date for the birth of Jesus, a date that is laden with symbolism that first-century Jews would have understood as connecting the messianic birth to the sin of the Watchers. Then he goes through and reads Revelation 12, 1 through 7. He says, "It is quite clear that the signs in the heavens, where John is specifically looking, John writing the book of Revelation, are indisputably astronomical, sun, moon, and stars." And he concludes that saying the specific signs require attention. So the woman in this vision in Revelation 12, the key figure and logical starting point for interpreting Revelation 12 astronomically is the woman. Since the woman gives birth to the messianic figure and is then persecuted and has to flee into the desert, scholars agree that verses 2 through 6 reveal that this woman is a picture of the faithful community, Israel, which existed before and after the coming of Christ. Israel, of course, is described as the Virgin of Zion in the Old Testament and produces the Messiah in fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. More specifically, of course, Mary comes to mind as the Jewish girl who gives birth to Jesus, but Virgin Israel best fits both parts of the description of the woman. I want to get, I don't want to read everything he read or he wrote. I want to get to kind of the meat. What is John signifying when describing this woman? This much is certain. The woman in the first 3 verses is featured as being in heaven, and both the sun and the moon are associated with her. Revelation 12 gives us clear details. The woman is clothed with the sun. There are 12 stars around her head, and the moon is at her feet. So she is an astronomical sign. The idea that the woman is a constellation is made plausible when one looks closely at the text. The description of that the woman was clothed with the sun is stock astronomical language for the sun being in the midst of a constellation. While the sun is in the woman, the moon is at her feet. For this situation to occur, the constellation of the woman must be, in astronomical language, on the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the imaginary line in the sky that the sun and moon follow on their journey through the zodiac constellations. So, now he's going to quote another person. The Apostle John saw the scene when the sun was clothing or adorning the woman. This surely indicates that the position of the sun in the vision was located somewhere mid-body to the woman between the neck and the knees. The sun could hardly be said to clothe her as if it were situated in her face or near her feet. The only time of year that the sun could be in the position to clothe the celestial woman called Virgo, the constellation Virgo, that is to be mid-bodied to her, in the region where a pregnant woman carries a child, is when the sun is located between about 150 and 170 degrees along the ecliptic. This clothing of the woman by the sun occurs for a 20-day period each year. This 20-degree spread could indicate the general time when Jesus was born. So Heiser continues that the constellation of the Virgin giving birth to the Messiah would of course have been viewed as quite coherent by the Magi, especially if they knew about Isaiah 7:14. But even they were ignorant of this prophecy, because it's in Revelation, after the fact. They would have been ignorant of this prophecy. This astro-theological linkage would still make sense to them, since the sign we know as Virgo has strong association with other ancient mother goddess figures who would produce divine kings. So the constellation of Virgo was known in pagan circles and pagan cultures as representing a goddess who would give birth to a divine king. So they would make, the Magi would make that connection, even if we don't see it, because we're so far removed from what they know. So the detail in Revelation 12 that the moon was located under the feet of the woman must not be forgotten in all of this. The sun must be in the Virgin constellation while the moon is simultaneously at her feet for John's vision to be accurately interpreted astronomically. Remember we said, okay, what did we say? 20-day period. So what he's going to do in the text here, he's going to narrow that 20-day period down, and he's going to say, because of the moon's behavior relative to the ecliptic and Virgo in any given year, that 20-day window narrows to roughly 90-minute period in which to astronomically pinpoint the birth of the child. Keep in mind, this doesn't tell us what year, okay? This will tell us what time of year, like what 90-minute period in the year this will take place. But it could be any given year, but he's gonna drill down even further here. So now the child in the vision of Revelation. Revelation 12 verse 5 is very explicit that the child is Jesus, the promised Messiah. It says, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God in his throne. So this is an allusion to Psalm 2, which prophesies that Messiah would defeat God's enemies and be installed as ruler over all the nations. Coupled with the description of the ascent of the child up to God in his throne. I'm skimming to see if he gets to more of the timing here. Now he talks about the dragon. Scholars of the book of Revelation have long noted the connection of the dragon to Old Testament terminology for the sea monster that symbolized chaos. There are two major candidates for constellations to be connected with the dragon. Why are you starting with the second one? I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly here. Maybe I should back up here a bit. Throughout the ancient Near East, the sea monster symbolized the war between good and evil, between gods and chaos. Obviously, in similar fashion to the meaning of abyss in chapter 9, verse 1 and 2, this builds on the fact that the nations surrounding the Mediterranean basin, the sea meant unfathomable depths. I'm going to say it again. Unfathomable. Unfathomable. The sea meant unfathomable depths and the chaos of death. Thus, Leviathan, or the dragon, came to represent all the terrors of the sea, and thus the presence of evil and death. It also signified nations that stood against God and his people. The dragon, or Leviathan, is defeated both at the beginning of creation and at the day of the Lord. 1 Enoch chapter 60 speak of the female sea monster Leviathan and the male behemoth destroyed at the great day of the Lord. The second sign is a fire-colored dragon. The color red locates it in the southern sky. The fact that the dragon's tail sweeps away a third of the stars further points to a location generally lacking in stars compared to other sky locations. And here I thought that meant that Satan was going to draw a third of the angels with him. It might still...
It could be both, could be double beating.
It could still mean that, but in this case, in the astronomical picture in Revelation, it's an area of the sky that is devoid of stars. This again in the south is the region of the abyss. This question we might pose now is, what constellation does John label as the red dragon, the dragon of the south? Obviously, it is not Draco, which is found at the North Pole. One option is for the constellation Hydra. Immediately above Hydra and accompanying it are the constellations of Corax, which is the raven, and Crater, which have 7 and 10 stars, respectively. Huh? 7 heads, 10 horns? Corax, with 7, corresponding to the number of heads in Revelation 12, lies closer to Virgo. On the other hand, this other scholar argues that the prototypical dragon of the sky is really ancient Scorpio, which was originally a larger set of stars than the present constellation. It was truly gigantic even by celestial zodiac standards, since it originally consisted of 2 zodiac signs, that is Libra and Scorpio, which had been split apparently. It was only relatively recently, that is about 237 BC, that it was divided by the Greeks. Hydra has the advantage of matching the description of 7 heads atop the dragon in Revelation. Hydra was also considered a sea serpent, imagery that matches descriptions in Revelation, which in turn come from the Leviathan material of the Old Testament. However, Hydra is not precisely on the ecliptic. It is adjacent and only slightly below the woman. In other words, Hydra is not positioned directly under the feet of the woman. This ecliptic problem is removed if Scorpio is what John had seen. Ancient Scorpio, the large one. But that said, the text of Revelation 12 only mentions the dragon. Only has the dragon present, not directly under her feet. Both options are possible correlations. Now, the combination of signs, not especially rare, but there are other celestial portents to consider that, although not mentioned by John in Revelation 12, are nevertheless present during the time of Jesus' birth and would have been taken as indications of the birth of a divine king by both Jews and Gentiles. So the preceding signs are those described by John. Their occurrence together is not rare, like I said. Happens every year. Although there are only a handful of dates in real time that can accommodate the events of a New Testament chronology for the birth of Jesus. Those dates narrow to one date. Once other astronomical events that occurred in the same time but are not noted in Revelation 12 are added to the celestial profile. So up until this time, we've been talking about the vision in Revelation 12, the constellations and all that. Now we're going to add in other factors from Scripture here. One of these extra events is the leading candidate for explaining the movement of a star as seen by the Magi in Matthew 2. And it's looking more and more likely that we'll get into Matthew 2 next week. Because yeah, this is going to be, which also helps me get ahead of the notes. One of these extra events is the leading candidate for explaining the movement of the star seen by the Magi in Matthew 2. The constellation directly above the head of Virgo in the zodiac is Leo the lion. The lion was the symbol associated with the tribe of Judah, from which the Messiah would come. The association arose from Genesis 49, where Jacob blessed him, referring to him in Leonine. Mike Heiser, God bless you.
Yeah.
Leonine terms, where he says, Judah is a lion's cub. This is quoting Genesis 49. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, have you gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from beneath his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. And he continues to build the case of the lion/king association with Jesus here with Revelation 5:5. Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. The constellation of Leo was also important in Gentile astrology. It was the chief or head sign of the zodiac and had special importance in astrological circles. Leo was considered a royal constellation since it was dominated by the star Regulus, which is called the king star. The status of Regulus in Leo is important because on one of the possible dates for the messianic birth, it came into conjunction with Jupiter. So the star Regulus, known as the king star, and the planet Jupiter, which would look like a star, and the planet Jupiter, which was known as the king planet, came into conjunction. Making it really right. As a result, in the constellation of Leo, the messianic sign of the Lion of Judah, to Jews who read the heavens, had 2 conjoined signs of a royal birth within it. This combination of astronomical signs produces a unique set of circumstances that can only be accounted for by one date. And in point of fact, a 90-minute window on that date. This date, as we will see momentarily, has dramatic significance for the Jewish calendar because according to the signs in the heavens, where there was this conjunction and where the sun and the moon and Virgo were all in the proper locations, took place on September 11th, 3 BC. And one of the reasons that the Magi saw that the star disappeared and reappeared had to do with the movement, the peculiar movement of Jupiter's orbit. I'll explain, I'll read what Mike Heiser writes here. Jupiter is also important because it is the best explanation for the star whose movement was tracked by the Magi. Jupiter is well known for retrograde motion. And I've heard the word retrograde, but I did not know until, reading this, which was the appearance of movement back and forth in the night sky. Jupiter's first conjunction with Regulus began on September 14th, 3 BC, and continued through September 11th, 3 BC. On December 1st, 3 BC, Jupiter stopped its normal course through the fixed stars and began its annual retrogression or backward motion. And in doing so, once again, it headed toward the star Regulus. Then, on February 17th, 2 BC, the two were reunited. So there's a conjunction again, looking really bright. Jupiter continued on in its motion, still in retrogression, another 40 days, and then reverted to its normal motion through the stars. So the timing is right as the Magi embarked on their journey a year or so after Jesus was born. Now, what makes September 3rd or September 11th of 3 BC significant? Mr. tells you.
Yeah, I just can't. It's been a while. I can't remember.
September 11th of 3 BC was Rosh Hashanah that year.
Oh.
It was the Feast of Trumpets. It was the head of the new year.
Oh.
Oddly enough, yeah, it was not one of the feasts that required every male-bodied Jew to be in Jerusalem, because that would have been really difficult if they were in Bethlehem. But yeah, that is kind of, I don't know, I wonder what more he has to say about this. Because Mike Heiser will now get into the whole idea that September, the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, was also the date of the birth of Noah and the date he entered the ark. I mean, he gets into that. That kind of is outside of the scope of what we're studying here.
I think. Well, there is a podcast. Heiser did a podcast on the birth of Jesus when it was. If I can find that, I will share it with the group.
Yeah, put it in the group me.
Yeah.
Right?
And then just another note too, because I know like our view of astrology today is so much different from what it was back then. It's like we look at like astrology as kind of like pagan or witchcraft, and it's like, oh, like, you know, we use it for fortune telling and stuff, like, or those kind of like they used to have in the newspaper, oh, what is my, you know, fortune for today? But it was like completely different back then how they viewed the stars and stuff. And even God says in the Bible, you know, I give you these the stars for the signs and
seasons, and yeah.
So yeah, you want to divorce that idea from what it has become today.
Yeah, of like. And I'm always fond of pointing out that my twin nephews are walking refutations to astrology, because born the same day, same moment, two completely unique, distinct personalities. The oil and water. I mean, they get along, you know, they're and but they're just very little alike. But yeah, probably get to the Magi and Matthew and all that next week, because that's got Missler's retelling of the, oh my goodness, that is so amazing. Please tell me you're going to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next couple weeks. Yeah.
Nice. Because yeah, I was hoping to not have to cram all of this into one night because of how rich it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But and I'm sorry if I read so much in because when I'll be honest, when people read, I start to. So I was trying to kind of at least make his reading exciting, but it gets to the point. The bottom line is he uses Revelation 12 and a couple of other astronomical phenomena to point out Jesus' birth at September 11th, 3 BC.
Yeah, that is a really good book. Yeah.
So, everybody put your Christmas trees up.
Yeah.
In September, we'll have a Christmas party. You know, you can really fool your family when you bust out all the presents for them, and I didn't get anything for you.
Yeah.
Sit down and let me tell you about the Christmas story. Any further thoughts, or else I'll just stop the recording? Hi, Janelle.
Yeah.
Hi, Janelle.
You know,
Probably hi, Steven, too.